شكرا سيدي الرئيس.
Thank you, Mr. President. I congratulate you on your election as President of the General Assembly at its current session, and I thank your predecessor, His Excellency Dennis Francis, for presiding over the previous session. I also thank the Secretary General for the efforts exerted to fulfill his mandate under the United Nations Charter. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, as this session of the General Assembly is taking place, tensions internationally have reached a boiling point, and efforts to maintain international peace and security are confronted with real challenges and threats. Clashes are intensifying, crises are multiplying, conflicts are escalating, chaos is spreading, terrorism is gaining ground, the global economy is faltering, poverty rates are rising, climate change is accelerating, and development indicators are lagging. These are the unfortunate results of 8 decades of multilateral action that have followed the establishment of the United Nations. While we previously sought to promote preventive diplomacy and the peaceful settlement of disputes, we are witnessing today more direct wars and proxy wars waged using terrorist tools. And instead of harnessing scientific advancement for the benefit and well-being of all people, we are witnessing disgraceful use of modern technologies as deadly tools to sow death and destruction. Instead of investing efforts and resources in achieving sustainable development for all, some are flagrantly draining the resources of other countries, stealing from their people, and imposing unilateral coercive measures that impoverish and destroy nations. Mr. President, for more than a decade, Syria has experienced unparalleled suffering. It fell victim to a fierce terrorist war, direct attacks on its territories that continue to this day, a multifaceted and stifling economic blockade and an unprecedented political and media incitement campaigns. Billions of dollars were spent to erode the development progress that Syria has worked over decades to achieve. Billions more were spent to spread chaos and undermine security and stability, and to force millions of Syrians to leave their homes, only to become internally displaced or refugees in other countries. Ladies and gentlemen, nevertheless, rest assured that, despite everything, we have remained faithful to our strong beliefs, our firm positions, and to the choices we made as a nation. Syria never hesitated to protect and defend its people and never faltered in its war on terrorism. Economic hardships did not prevent us from meeting the needs of our people. All that has happened has revealed the true intentions of the collective West, which completely contradict with the principles and purposes that form the pillars and foundation and function of this international organization. Mr. President, the ongoing Israeli occupation of Arab territory since 1967, including the Syrian Arab Golan, and the genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity it commits are a glaring example of the failure of this organization, and namely the Security Council, to end this expansionist and racist occupation and the ongoing aggression. It is a damning proof that the United States has prevented the Council from fulfilling its responsibility to confront threats to international peace and security. Since the 7th of October 2023, the Israeli occupation has continued to commit bloody and terrorist crimes, adding another chapter to its 7-decade-long criminal record. Over the past months, the occupying forces and settler gangs have been carrying out a savage aggression on the Palestinian people and committing a genocide before the eyes of the whole world, which has claimed the lives of more than 42,000 Palestinians, most of whom are children and women. The Syrian Arab Republic strongly condemns the Israeli aggression against the Palestinian people and renew its solidarity with the legitimate struggle to liberate their occupied land and establish their independent state on their entire national territory with Jerusalem as its capital, while ensuring the right of the Palestinian refugees to return to their homeland in line with international law and relevant UN resolutions. Syria also condemns all attempts to liquidate UNRWA and suspend the services it provides to Palestinians on their land and in neighboring countries. We stress the need to hold Israel accountable for its direct targeting of more than 200 personnel working for UNRWA and other UN and humanitarian agencies. In an attempt to cover the failure of its war against the Palestinian people and to escape its internal crisis, the Israeli occupying forces implicate others in their internal crises and distract from the failed war against the Palestinian people. Hence, they have chosen to drag the region into a serious escalation while benefiting from the immunity, impunity, and unlimited support provided by certain countries, in particular the US, in a clear case of hypocrisy and double standards. Israeli forces have scaled up their attacks on countries in the region, including my country, Syria, targeting vital civilian facilities, residential buildings, and even diplomatic premises, resulting in the death of dozens of civilians, significant material damage, and hindering the delivery of humanitarian aid to Syrians. On the 27th of July 2024, Israeli occupying forces committed another heinous crime against our people in the occupied Syrian Golan when they targeted the Syrian town of Majd al-Shams, claiming the lives of 12 Syrian children. The criminal Israeli forces went even further, blaming others for this tragedy and exploiting the death of innocent Syrians for propaganda purposes. The open Israeli aggression has also extended to our brotherly Lebanon. 2 weeks ago, the Israeli occupation authorities committed an unprecedented crime against the Lebanese by using the means of communication as a tool to kill unarmed civilians in a collective manner. A few days ago, the Israeli occupation authorities targeted the southern suburb of Beirut with a treacherous and cowardly aggression, destroying an entire residential block using tons of explosive bombs to assassinate Hezbollah Secretary General Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, who for more than 3 decades led an honorable Lebanese national resistance against the Israeli occupation. This large-scale Israeli aggression, which is unfettered by any restrictions and limitations, is pushing the region to the brink of a dangerous escalation and confrontation whose consequences cannot be predicted and causing disastrous effects on peace and security, not only in our region, but also beyond it. The Syrian Arab Republic calls on all member states of the United Nations to work towards ending the Israeli aggression against Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon, and hold the occupation authorities accountable for their crimes, as well as prevent impunity. The Syrian Arab Republic reiterates that the Golan is an occupied Syrian territory and that its inhabitants are Syrian Arab citizens who are and will always be an integral part of the people of Syria. They have struggled over decades against the occupation. Syria stresses that regaining the full Syrian occupied Golan line with UN Resolution 242, 338, and 497 is an inalienable right and shall never be subject to compromise and will never be affected by the passage of time or be subject to the statute of limitation. Mr. President, the crimes and attacks of the Israeli occupying forces against Syria cannot be seen in separation from the subversive role played by certain Western countries, especially the US, the United States of America, corrects the interpreter. In my country, Syria, these countries have continued to violate Syria's sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity by illegally deploying their military forces inside Syria's territory allowing their officials to sneak into Syria and supporting separatist militia and terrorist groups. These countries have also worked to exacerbate the humanitarian situation of the Syrian people by depriving them of the benefit of the resources as a result of their systematic looting of Syria's national riches, as well, and by imposing inhumane, unilateral, coercive measures whose disastrous effects have affected all aspects of the daily lives of Syrians. These measures targeted various vital sectors, most notably the public health sector, energy sector, banks, financial transactions and transfers, transport, as well as the agriculture sector that has been affected by these measures that has led to reduced levels of food security. All the unfounded allegations made by Western countries to justify such illegal measures and to deny or downplay their catastrophic impacts have been laid bare in multiple recent UN reports. In this regard, my country reiterates its call for the immediate, full, and unconditional lifting of unilateral coercive measures as they amount to a collective punishment of the people and a form of economic terrorism and a flagrant violation of the UN Charter and international law. Mr. President, since the beginning of the terrorist war on my country, Syria, the Syrian government has responsibly and constructively engaged with all initiatives aimed at preserving Syria's sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity, protecting its people from terrorism, improving the living conditions of Syrians. Many measures have been taken to that end, which can be summed up as follows. 1. Mobilizing all efforts to eradicate terrorist groups that are enlisted by the Security Council and putting an end to their dark thinking, extremist ideology, practices based on killing, torture, enforced disappearance, restriction of freedom, recruitment of children, discrimination, and violence against women and girls. The Syrian government continues to confront the remaining organizations to end the suffering of Syrians, and we call upon all countries to repatriate their citizens currently detained in illegal centers in northeastern Syria to end and close them due to the danger they pose to them in the future. 2. Pursuing national reconciliation and local settlement agreements, where 23 amnesty decrees have been issued, which facilitated the social reintegration of those who had lost their way. The most recent of these was Legislative Decree number 27 of 22 September 2024. 3. Supporting humanitarian access by granting the UN multiple authorizations to use 3 border crossings to deliver humanitarian assistance to eligible Syrian civilians in northwest Syria, and by granting the necessary approvals for humanitarian deliveries from inside Syria, despite all of the attempts by terrorist groups to obstruct humanitarian access and steal or divert the aid. 4. Continuing the efforts of the Syrian state institutions to enhance their role and increase their efficiency by holding on time all constitutionally mandated entitlements and following up on the process of economic and administrative development and reform, and moving forward with efforts to modernize legislative structures, including those related to strengthening the rule of law, developing media work, social protection programs, and empowering women, protecting the rights of children and persons with disability, as well as implementing the strategic plan for gender equality and developing legislation regulating conscription. 5. Sparing no effort to support the dignified return of refugees and displaced people to their areas. An agreement was reached with the Office of UNHCR on several measures which are being implemented accurately. Discussions are also underway with a number of neighboring countries to launch innovative projects that allow the provision, which would be a model to assist and facilitate the return and accelerate it. 6. Openly engaging with all the efforts and initiatives made at the political level, including we have been taking part in the Astana meetings, which have achieved concrete results. The Syrian government is also in constant contact with the UN Special Envoy for Syria and is cooperating with him in line with his mandated role as a facilitator of a Syrian-led and Syrian-owned political process. 7. Committing to dialogue and diplomacy as a basis to a course for correcting relations with other countries. The Syrian government has positively engaged with the various initiatives put forward in this regard, in line with our firm belief that the interests of countries must be built on sound relations based on specific principles and clear grounds to achieve the desired objectives. In particular, mutual respect for state sovereignty and territorial unity, joint action to address threats to security and stability, and pursuing common interests without interfering in internal affairs. Ladies and gentlemen, as Syria is healing from the wounds of what it's been exposed and subjected to, it looks to the future with a sense of hope and optimism. However, the success of its efforts necessarily requires the collective West to stop politicizing humanitarian work and linking it to political conditionality. Donors need to fulfill their pledges in humanitarian funding and provide sustainable solutions for livelihoods and supporting resilience, including by working to strengthen early recovery projects and increase and the immediate, complete, and unconditional lifting of unilateral coercive measures. Mr. President, Syria reiterates its demand for a Middle East zone free of weapons of mass destruction, in particular nuclear weapons, and to compel Israel to eliminate its arsenal of weapons of mass destruction, join relevant international treaties and conventions, and place its installations under an international monitoring. Syria expresses its support and solidarity with Arab countries, especially those facing challenging circumstances resulting from foreign interference, natural events, or climate change. Syria reiterates its support to the right of the Russian Federation to defend itself and to maintain its national security in response to the West's hostile policies and in rejection of the logic of hegemony and unipolarism. Syria also condemns the attempts to confiscate Russian financial assets. Syria expresses once again its full support to the Islamic Republic of Iran and its legitimate right to defend its national security and the peaceful use of nuclear energy, and we commend Iran's constructive and responsible approach in this regard. Syria renews its support to the One China principle and the stances of the People's Republic of China as it faces external attempts to interfere in its internal affairs and deems it necessary to defend its sovereignty and confront defend its sovereignty. Syria condemns the decades-long U.S. economic embargo on Cuba and rejects the issuance of the infamous list called the countries sponsoring terrorism. Syria calls for an end to the U.S. military drills and exercises on the Korean Peninsula as they contribute to raising tensions in this region. My country reiterates its solidarity with Venezuela in the face of the flagrant interference in its internal affairs and the hostile policies against it. Syria calls for the immediate lifting of all unilateral coercive measures imposed by Western countries on Russia, Iran, Venezuela, Belarus, Cuba, Nicaragua, and the DPRK, and Eritrea and others, as well as on my country, Syria. Mr. President, in conclusion, I would like to call on the countries of the world to summon the courage and make the right choice to guarantee a better present and future for present and future generations and save humanity from the scourge of all-out wars looming on the horizon by supporting the establishment of a more just and balanced through the reform of political and financial institutions to end the state of hegemony and unipolarity and later attempts to undermine the Charter of the UN and replace it with a so-called rules-based order.